Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be working on irrigation here on our farm, and irrigation's a pretty big deal here in Kansas. We have 3 different pivots, center pivots, irrigation pivots, that we run on our farm. 2 of them we irrigate out of ponds, and so it's kind of, I would call it kind of partial irrigation. It's not like full irrigation like when you have underground water. But today we are working on installing our 3rd pivot, which we've had 2 for many years. And this spring, Valley Irrigation installed a pivot on one of our rented fields. And so I'm gonna show you guys what that new pivot looks like. And then we're pumping out of the river, which is a different experience for us. And so I'm gonna show you guys kind of how we're setting that up, some of the things we're having to do. Irrigation definitely isn't always simple or easy. So this is the field we're in here. You can see the pivot on the far side, but I'm gonna head over here to the landing that goes into the river first. My dad and my brother Nathan are down here working already, and I think they've already gotten quite a bit done today. So when this farm was purchased by our landlord, it came with some flood irrigation up here on the flat area. We're not very equipped to do flood irrigation. You saw last year we flooded for basically a year, kind of buying the time till pivots got put up on that farm. And it's kind of the same thing here. We didn't want to flood irrigate this field, and so our landlord paid to have a pivot put up, and we are working on going into the river.
Can you hold the pin when I...
All right, so we got the river screen hooked onto the pipe here. We took the river screen down to the water, and then we hooked the pipe on, and then we hooked this up first. This is our engine and our pump, and we hooked this up, and then we backed it down in there and hooked it onto the river screen. Was because my phone got too hot, because it's too hot out here, but I'm not too hot right now because I was the one in the water. I was swimming in the water down here, hooking the river screen up and maneuvering it. So Nathan and Dad, they just stayed up here nice and dry.
We're gonna put a crane up here,
yeah,
to hopefully make it easier in the future.
But we haven't gotten that done yet, and we're needing to water pretty soon, so kind of step by step.
I kind of wanted to visualize where everything was gonna go too. So.
Yep. So behind me, you can see we kind of have a big problem here. When we dug this river landing here, there was no trees in the river. This was all cleared out. So we thought, you know, the water's coming around the bend here. This would be a great place. You know, there's not going to be any buildup here. Well, next thing we know, it rained, and now there's a big buildup here. But it's likely that this will all be washed away at some point, and we're just hoping that it doesn't build back here to where we're trying to pump from. All right, Nathan is working on we're gonna try to fasten he already fastened the cable there to the culvert that keeps the river screen from being pushed downstream by the water.
We could have put it on a tree, but
trees are a little up high. And yeah, it's hot. All this irrigation pipe is hot to the touch. All right, everybody. So it has been probably 3 weeks since I filmed that last footage for you. My phone was really hot that day. It was over 100 degrees. I was having trouble with my phone overheating. I should have had the GoPro with me so I could have filmed more of putting the river screen in the water, but I didn't. So the river screen, it turns in a circle. When it's pumping, the water flow actually turns it. It's powered by the water flow. This pipe goes down. It looks like it's not in the water, but it does actually go into the water, and it sucks the water from right under there. These are this is flotation, so that it floats. But the pipe goes down and sucks up the water. These hoses here are to prime the pump, and I can try to have Nathan explain that process a little bit more for you guys in a later video. This is our pump right here, and so basically you use these hoses to prime the pump, and then the pump starts sucking up water, and it's spinning and pushing water up this pipe out to the pivot. And so this is the engine that powers the pump. These are both, you know, pretty old engine, pretty old pump, but it gets the job done. It's not like we're really lacking or anything. This hose up here goes up to the propane tank. So this engine is running on propane, and so that's kind of how that works. All right, so this is our river landing. You can kind of see we're up here on the bank, and the trees were actually already taken out. There weren't really any trees here, but we did have a excavator come in here and dig out this. You know, the ground kind of goes like this, so we had to have that work done. There did used to be an old river landing right over there where they pumped for flood irrigation, but that was not going to work for the pivot, what we're doing here. So the water comes up here and goes into this riser where it goes underground and goes straight across the field to the pivot over there. So we posted a picture of this whole setup on our Facebook page, and we got quite a few comments, and I'm going to try to answer those comments for you now before we go into the rest of the video. The first comment was, is it legal to pump out of the river in Kansas? And the answer is yes and no. You have to get permission, you have to get rights in order to do this, but hundreds, if not thousands of farmers on this river, the Smoky Hill River, pump out of this river. And pretty much any river in Kansas, I think, gets irrigated out of. It's very common to pump out of the river. This field, when our landlord purchased it, it came with water rights already built into this field. Now, you can apply for water rights. If you buy a different field that doesn't have water rights, you can purchase water rights for that field, but it's a lengthy process, and anytime you have to put irrigation infrastructure into place, it's very costly, both time and money. So the other comment and question we had on our Facebook page was, why don't we irrigate every single field we have? Well, the number one answer to that is that you have to have water available. There is a river stream of water right next to this field. And so there is water available to pump here. If you look on an aerial map of where we are in Kansas, you'll see that all the fields along the river have circles, have pivot irrigation circles where people are pumping out of the river. Now, we do have some underground aquifers here in Kansas where you can pump from underneath the ground. But that's definitely not the case for a lot of our fields. We do not have underground water. Our main farm, we don't even have a well on that farm. We have to use water district water to, you know, power wash our vehicles, or we use ponds to water the cattle, but we'll get to that in a bit. The reason that you have to have water rights to pump out of the river is because if everybody was pumping out of the river and it wasn't regulated, and this actually used to be the case, the river would be pumped dry, and you'd have some issues from that. You want to keep water in the river all year long. What we actually are fortunate to have here in this part of Kansas is the Smoky Hill River. About 30 miles that way is the Canopolis Reservoir that catches all the flood water in the spring. This river used to come way out of its banks and flood all the surrounding country, but the reservoir catches most of that now and then releases it slowly throughout the year and keeps the water at a good level for pumping. So, you know, 100 years ago, this river would come out of its banks, flood the countryside, and then in the summer, it would go dry. Now, because of man-made technology, we're able to keep this water at a good enough level for plants and animals to thrive and farmers to irrigate. And so we're definitely fortunate to have this body of water here to pump out of. Kansas's underground aquifers are draining. They're getting too low. And so there's a lot of pivots out west that are either being backed way down on the water they use or taken out completely because they're running out of water underground. So in some places like Nebraska, they can just pump and pump and pump. And like Arkansas, I know they can pump and pump and pump, and they're pretty much never going to run out of water underground. But here in Kansas, because of our climate and because of the way that aquifer is, you know, it eventually runs out. It's not unlimited water. All right, so behind me, we've got the valley irrigation pivot. And what a center irrigation pivot is that underground line that's coming over here from the river, underground. It connects, it comes up under here and pumps water into the irrigation pivot. And this center tower is what stays in place, and then the rest of the towers, they move around the field like this, which is why it's called a pivot, is because this is the pivot point, and then that circles around the field. This field is only a half circle. We have one other center pivot that's 3/4 of a circle, and then one other that's a full circle. And basically what each one of these has is a drive line that makes these wheels move, and it moves all the wheels at the same time, and it just moves kind of inch by inch over the field until the field is watered. All right, so next I'm going to take you out to our other two pivots, where you can kind of see how we historically have pumped out of ponds. We have never pumped out of the river before this year, but we have pumped out of ponds for probably 40 years. I think my grandpa was the one who first had the idea to build these ponds to irrigate out of. Now, we had a few questions or a few comments on Facebook that were essentially saying, well, why don't you just build a pond in every single one of your fields and irrigate every single one of your fields? And where our home farm is located, we actually have a lot of water flow through there. It's probably draining probably 4 or 5 square miles each, versus a lot of these flat fields out here they're not close to a stream of water. And if you don't have underground water and you don't have a stream of water to capture, you can't irrigate. It's as simple as that. Even if you do have a stream of water, to do the dirt work, to capture the water, you need a big pond in order to irrigate a 100-acre field. We're not talking, a little puddle that you could irrigate your garden with. We're talking millions and millions of gallons of water in order to irrigate a 100-acre field. So the ponds we're about to see are about 60 million gallons each, and that's just a conservative estimate. It might be more than that when they're full. And that allows us to pump our circle pivots, maybe two or three full circles. So it's, like I said earlier in the video, it's not full irrigation. When they have underground water, or when you're pumping out of the river, you could probably make, I have no idea because I've never done it. I'm guessing you'd make 10 or 11 circles. So it's a much bigger difference to have unlimited water, or, it's never unlimited because your water right limits you to a certain amount of water you can use per year. But, I'm guessing that people who have larger water rights can probably run their circles 11 times per year, whereas we're only really running our circle pivots 2 or 3 times a year. And so that's what building a reservoir gets you. So the reason I bring that up is because cost is a huge inhibitor to irrigation. The reason why we don't irrigate every field is because it would cost a tremendous amount of money. If we were to, take 1,000 acres right now, that would cost at least probably $2 million to put that infrastructure together. And we do not have that kind of money. That would be to do all the dirt work, to figure out ways to capture water, and to put in pivots or drip irrigation, whatever it is. Any sort of irrigation is going to cost you at least $1,000 an acre, if not $2,000. And so that's a huge inhibitor, is money. Now, even if money were not an object, that would be a tremendous amount of time. It would, it would take our whole summer. We already don't get a whole lot of summer vacation. July is kind of our slow time on the farm, July and August, and we do spend some of that time irrigating. So if we took on irrigating full force, we would never have any free time. And that is something that when people comment on our Facebook page and say, why don't you guys just irrigate more? It's like, well, we want to have lives. The third thing to remember is that most of the time in Kansas, dryland crops do just fine. We're talking 9 years out of 10. We may have some dry spells, but farmers are profitable in Kansas on dryland crops. And so it's really hard to justify spending the time and money on irrigation if it's not always going to pay for itself. And so every farm is different, and I've said this in lots of videos, and it's no different with irrigation. I would say less than 10% of the acres in our county are irrigated. The 90% that are dryland, those farmers are making good money on their ground, even though it's not irrigated. But I would also say that the farmers that have irrigation and that do it well are some of the most profitable farmers in the area. So irrigated ground is definitely, it sells for maybe twice as much as dryland. Here in Kansas, our dryland crops our dryland sells for $2,500 an acre, and our irrigated ground would sell for maybe $5,000–6,000 an acre. So big difference between dryland and irrigated, but it just doesn't make sense to irrigate every acre, both from a practical standpoint and from a time standpoint. So I hope that makes sense. That was a really long explanation, but I tell you what, people went nuts on the comments when they saw us pumping out of the river and our crops drying up and all this different stuff. So, all right, we are here at the main farm. This is one of our ponds, one of our reservoirs that my grandpa built by building this large dam across. Basically, water runs, and then it runs right past our farm. And my grandpa built this one, and this is also the pond that we water our cattle from. We have another pump right over there that we water our cattle pens with. So this is a very valuable pond for us. We do irrigate out of it. It's one of the three, and you can see our 730, our old antique tractor, is what we use to back this contraption down into it. This is the same as the river screen. It's got a suction pipe that goes down into the water. Then it's got a pump, and it's got an engine, and we put it all on that trailer so we can back it down into the pond where we can get enough depth to pump out of. So this pond pumps to our 3/4 circle, which we pump out of this pond, and then there's another pond right on the other side of this dam. I'll show you here. But just were that pond, and here is our lagoon, where we also pump to that 3/4 long pivot. So it's hard to tell, but this lagoon's actually almost empty. So that's why we moved to the other pond. But this drains the entire feedlot. All of the runoff from the feedlot comes down through this draw and through this draw and drains underneath here into the lagoon. So we are actually required by law to capture all of our runoff from the feedlot, and so that's what this lagoon is for. So that's one of our 3 ponds, and when we pump this water onto our crops, it's similar to when we spread manure on our crops. It's pretty much liquid manure, and that provides some extra fertility to our crops, some free fertilizer. That pivot is about a 1.5 miles from here, so we actually have a line buried 1.5 miles to that pivot, and so it's a ways to pump it. It takes a little bit for the water to reach all the way up there. All right, here's our 3rd pond. This is our biggest one. And I would say the other 2 ponds put together are probably 60 million gallons. And this one is probably 60 million gallons. It actually goes all the way back to there. So this is normally full of water, but we've pumped it down, and then there's a culvert underneath here. We've actually pumped it down to where it's only on this side. And so we're gonna keep pumping. This one's not running right now. But we'll actually farm this on dry years when the pond's not full. We'll go ahead and farm through here. But this year we actually had water, and so we've been able to utilize the water from all those rains in May. And this pond only has to be pumped right to the top of this hill. So right next to where we're standing here, this is actually where the pivot reaches to. And this is the full circle pivot. So this one goes all the way around. In the rest of the video, you're gonna see Nathan priming this pump that we just saw there. And you're gonna see him get it going, and he's going to talk a little bit about a few different things. And sorry this video has been kind of sporadic like usual, but trying to do my best to explain all this stuff from a base level of people who don't know anything about irrigation because we do get a lot of questions about kind of what it's like. So you can see in a very dry summer, these beans look really nice because they're irrigated by this circle pivot. And we've got a road from the pump out to the center of the pivot so that we can drive out here and get it started and turn it off. All right, so you saw our new pivot earlier in the video. This is our like 40-year-old pivot, Zematic pivot. It's pretty much, you know, even though it's 40 years older, it pretty much functions the same way. So this one actually runs off of a generator, but we are in the process of getting electricity out here to power this pivot. Our new pivot you saw earlier in the video is powered by electricity. We don't have to worry about having a generator out there. We have underground electric. So yeah, it's the same concept of you got the center here, and you got, I think this one's 7 towers, and it just goes around in a circle and covers this whole bean field except for the corners. And so these beans looking really nice. So there's the pivot we were just at. There's the ponds and the home farm over there. And then over here to the left by our uncle's feedlot over here is our other pivot we're gonna go look at. All right, so here's our third pivot. It's actually going right now because you guys saw it was getting pumped out of the one pond. So it is going, you can see it sprinkling water. Hard to see above the corn what it looks like out in the field, but you can kind of see the nozzles. They spin around in a circle and water the corn.
Good morning, everyone. So I am about to start up what we call the big pivot. It's funny because the two pivots up here by the home place are actually both the same size, although this one covers more acres. So I guess it is technically still the big pivot. Flex is we wrapped it in saran wrap, a little hack we learned from our neighbor to make sure there's no air leaks, because that rubber sitting out in the sun and sitting all winter will get cracked. So that's why we have that wrapped, and it should suck up there pretty fast. That is actually the reason we float our pump and back it down in the water, is so we have less distance to have to suck water, and then we can also leave it here longer. It'll pump a long time in this position all the way to the bottom of the suction line, and then we'll have to move it down the bank. So it's kind of a unique way of pumping out of a pond. There are other ways to do it. There's more sophisticated ways to do it. This is a pretty economical way to do it. You can get an engine and a centrifugal pump pretty economically, and we don't just have we're not able to water a whole crop to grain. We need help from nature, but so we can't afford to just spend all the money like people that irrigate their whole entire crop can have nicer irrigation systems. But anyways, this really helps us get through July and August, and it can turn a dry year into a good crop, and it can turn a wetter year into a really great crop for our area. So I will get it started here and just let you guys watch. I gotta do some greasing. I'm gonna grease the drive line and the pump real quick first. My old pickup, the check engine light would come on during irrigation season because it recognized that it was losing air somewhere, I guess. But this one, where I'm hooking this one up, doesn't do that. So, all right, I turned my fuel on. At least it hasn't yet. Maybe it will if I keep doing it. Just check the water. Looks good. Check the oil while I'm stopped. Looks perfect. We're at 41.95. Put on about 100 hours so far this year, so still have a ways before changing oil. Pressure builds and the water gets up and pressurizes the pivot, that'll drop to, we pump around 550 to 600 gallon per minute from this pump. So a lot of people, you know, some wells can pump a lot more than that, but that's what we can get through this circle. So we'll wait for it to come out the other end. I was gonna try to get out here before it was coming. There it is. Oh, the GoPros. So there it just started coming out the end gun. When it comes downhill, it comes really fast and fills up those nozzles. So I already started the generator because the generator died last night. It had a fuel issue. And so I shut it off. I shut down the pump at like 1:30 a.m. because I didn't want to spend too much time dealing with it at 1:30 a.m. But I got a part this morning and put it on and made sure it run, and then I just left it running to get, because it stopped in one spot and got that spot, you know, extra soaked up. So I left it running to kind of move it off that spot. And now we start the water up again and off she goes. So it's a pretty easy process when everything works. If you ever don't have suction, you can't get your pump to prime, then you have to look for problems. You have to make sure you don't have leaks anywhere. Usually the start of the season can be difficult, finding problems that magically appear over winter. And then the pivots themselves have gearboxes on every wheel and motors on every tower. That on the one over there, we've had issues there this year, and sometimes those can be a pain to find. But when everything's working, it's really nice to hear your pump running and watch your pivot moving and know that your crops are growing underneath them, even if it's no rain in the forecast like right now. But this will help us get through the hot, dry times, and rain will come back eventually.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video today. I know it was a long one, full of a lot of explaining, but hopefully you learned something about how irrigation is done in Kansas. There will definitely be another irrigation video in the upcoming months, because I'd like to get a drone shot of some of our pivots going over crops, get a little more action footage for you guys. I've been gone for quite a bit of July, so I pretty much had to film a lot of this in one day. But hopefully you guys have some good questions and I can get them answered for you in the next video. So leave a comment below. Tell us what you think, or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.